Oh, pardon me, just a moment. Don't do that. Just playing together.
Hello, and welcome to your latest installment of the Laurel and Hardy podcast, the podcast in which we take a deep dive into the films of Stan Laurel and Oliver Hardy, film by film, chronologically in the order that they were made. Now, we've reached the boys' third talkie and their 37th film together, the absolutely wonderful Men of War. So this is episode 37, part 1. Yes, I'm splitting the coverage of this particular film across 2 episodes as I did for the last film we covered, Birthmarks. Now, just to be clear, this isn't necessarily a new format that's going to happen for every film. It just so happens that this interview that I recorded with Richard W. Bann is connected to his forthcoming book that we're working on with him, which looks at the Hal Roach Studios using the production of Men of War as a sort of case study. The book also provides a great contextual introduction to 1929 and really sets the scene for the world in which this classic short was filmed. You may have seen some early graphics advertising the book in the last few issues of our Laurel and Hardy magazine. It's sitting next to my book, Laurel and Hardy Silence. Richard's book has a working title of Laurel and Hardy as Men of War Just Playing Together, and it will be published by Twice Two Media Limited in the near future. But if you can't wait that long, don't worry, because Richard himself is about to read you an extract from the manuscript over the course of the next hour or so. And in addition, there are more extracts from the book featured as 2 articles in the winter 2022 issue of the Laurel and Hardy magazine. You can snap up a copy of that to keep you going by visiting our website, www.laurelandhardyfilms.com, or by clicking the link direct to that issue in the podcast show notes. So that's enough idle falderdash from me, for now at least, so let's pop on over to the soda fountain where Richard is waiting for us. So, let's see. Soda, 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 and what will you have, Mr. Bann? I couldn't let an episode about Men of War go by without inviting our good friend Richard W. Bann back onto the show. And the reason for that is that Men of War is a film that has provided me and Russell with an opportunity to work with Richard on an exciting new book project that we're publishing together. So, here to talk about the book and what we can expect from it is film historian and Hal Roach Studios expert Richard Bann. So, Richard, welcome back to the Laurel and Hardy podcast.
Thank you, Patrick. And I should mention that just today, maybe you heard this in the news, we had an earthquake here this morning out in Malibu, where Stan Laurel used to live.
Oh wow! Oh, was it a big one?
It was. The first reading was 5.1 and they downgraded it to 4.7. But it got your attention for 10 or 15 seconds.
When all of a sudden a terrible storm came up. Didn't it, Stanley?
Yeah, and then we floundered in a typhoid.
Not typhoid. He means typhoon, sugar.
Very excited. And I'm drinking tea here in your honor. No crumpets, whatever they are.
Where's my tea and crumpets? Hurry.
Have you never had a crumpet, Richard?
I don't even know what it is. What is it?
It's like a little bread. It's like a little round bread. What would you call it? Like do you know, like an English muffin? You have English muffins?
Yes.
Yeah. So imagine an English muffin, similar sort of size, but it's kind of probably a little bit thicker, and it has more sort of air holes, air pockets inside it. So it's kind of, and it's a bit spongy.
Okay.
So
I'll take your word
nice
for that.
When you come over here, I'll make sure we get some crumpets for you.
Now, the way this book's in progress, is that Russ Babbage asked for a 2,000-word essay on Men of War for the magazine, but I soared past that pretty quickly, and in doing so, there were many related things I couldn't resist sharing. So therefore, the text just grew organically, and the scope is far wider than just the film Men of War. So consequently, there were side trips that I didn't anticipate or plan as the story evolved. And these include topics that just arose out of the Men of War story, such as, and you'll see how, The first Mrs. Stan Laurel, Walt Disney, Charlie Chaplin, Leo McCarey, the transition to sound pictures, behind the scenes incidents from so many people who were there, Fort Roach and military service, Charlie Chase, Jean Harlow, Mussolini, nepotism, Film Classics, Inc., all the trouble Stan Laurel caused the studio making a film that tied up the entire lot for a full year and took years more to barely recover its bloated cost overruns that Stan caused, namely Babes in Toyland. And lots of testimony, lots of interviews, some with people no one else ever got to, including Lou Foster, who directed Men of War. And what the real subtext is the comedy filmmaking culture at Hal Roach Studios. Who was responsible for it? Who sustained it? And how? In other words, what was it there that allowed these people to come together and create pictures we all still love, like Men of War? How did that happen? Why did it work? That's really the heart of it. Plus, the complete story of the conception, creation, production, cost, distribution, exhibition, reissues through all the media across 95 years now, and the ownership and stewardship or lack thereof of Men of War. So, and another issue that the text explores, following the movie Stan and Ollie, which we all love, fans more than ever were vocal about elevating Stan Laurel at the expense of Hal Roach, which is unfair and unfounded, according to, well, two things. The facts reflected in studio documents would be the first one, and I've seen virtually every single one of them that still exist in this world today. And secondly, according to people who were there, who worked at Hal Roach Studios, who then lived into the mid-1960s and beyond, so that I was able to talk to them or correspond with them. And I was lucky to meet approximately 100 of these people, these Hal Roach Studios alumni. A lot of them were in our gang, so they were kids at the time, but nevertheless, about 100 of these people, and many of whom became close friends. Same for Randy, as you know. So the text ranges far afield from just Men of War, while always coming back to Men of War. But I did not set out to tackle any of these matters. They just developed out of covering Men of War, as you'll see. It's an interesting journey, and there are a few films, that you will never be able to see again in the same way when you learn some of these stories that have never been shared.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, that's a good thing.
Is it a good thing? Okay, good.
Yeah, I think it is a good thing.
Yeah,
it is. I mean, I don't want to tip any of them, but I think you'll enjoy some of these stories.
Oh, I'm sure I will.
So I started out as a CPA in public accounting until I was 26. And then I got very lucky when I was asked to work at the Easton Phelan Corporation and Black Hawk Films. When the company was sold and then wrecked, I went on to do consulting for several other Hal Roach Studios licensees, and then finally was hired by the successor in interest to Hal Roach Studios in the Eastern Hemisphere, meaning they were Hal Roach Studios in the Eastern Hemisphere, which was then part of a company that had become the largest producer and distributor of motion pictures and television programming in the world outside the United States. It was privately held by the two co-founders, and they controlled a constellation of production, post-production, and distribution companies and TV networks that dealt in licensing, exhibition, and rights trading, and they employed 10,000 people. And I reported to one of the two co-founders of this company, which was headquartered in Munich. The most important, what I'm getting to is the most important thing I did there across 3 decades was to locate, restore, and preserve the Hal Roach Studios film library. And when we were done, after spending $4 million of their money, I saved all the existing nitrate from purposeful destruction. When I'm stammering at the thought of telling you this if you don't know this story. Our corresponding partner in rights for the Western Hemisphere here in LA wanted to destroy it all. They thought they didn't need the nitrate anymore. Now, we shared copyright with them, but not property rights. And I had previously pulled all this nitrate, which had been deposited at the Library of Congress, so that we could do our work preparing new 35 millimeter safety fine grains and dupe negs for films like Men of War and all the rest here in LA. But we didn't own the nitrate. We shared it, but they alone owned property rights. And when we were done, like so many of the studios, since the movies began over a century ago, they said, we'll never need this nitrate again. It's a fire hazard. And besides, we don't want to pay all the storage fees. So let's have it all destroyed. Or as Wilfred Lucas once said, and still they come. All the studios thought this way. We'll never need this again. But I stopped that. I saved the nitrate. I could have owned it myself because they offered it to me in order to get rid of it. All I had to do was assume the monthly storage bill, and I could have owned, for instance, the very Kodak stock nitrate negative that was loaded into the camera when, for instance, Laurel and Hardy were performing scenes for Men of War just a few feet away. But as an individual, obviously, I couldn't, pardon me, be the proper steward. And this was about 20 years ago. I steered everything into the custody of the UCLA Film and Television Archive and David Packard's new facility, the Packard Humanities Institute outside of LA. Anyway, I've spent my life with these films, writing about them, finding the preprint, restoring it, preserving it, working with attorneys in so much litigation, marketing the films, licensing and distributing the films for television, for home video and non-theatrical exhibition, getting them seen. That's really been my motivation all along. Not doing books, but because I believe in the product, and the objective is the survival of the films, getting them seen and talked about so that they stay alive, so that they have a life long after we are gone, so that future generations will be as lucky as we have been to discover and love these movies. Yes, they're old movies, but they're new to anyone who hasn't seen them before.
Yeah, and they're timeless as well, aren't they? That's the thing.
Yes, they are. They're timeless. And here's part of the proof. Now, today, all of a sudden, there are all these new books that you and others are doing, coming out about Laurel and Hardy, and that should help keep the Laurel and Hardy brand alive.
Yeah, we hope so.
I think all of us want to sustain the life of these films, and successfully introduce and launch them into future generations, because, as you say, the comedy is timeless. Yeah. And another part of my motivation all along was to make a connection to the scores of dedicated people who created these films to begin with, to acknowledge them, to give something back to them, even if it was only recognition by some of us that the work that they did mattered, especially after all these years. Tell these people that they weren't forgotten. And another thing, the public, the media, they never forget people like Marilyn Monroe or Frank Sinatra, but people like Anita Garvin or Marvin Hatley, they were forgotten, not by you and me, but by the public at large. Maybe they never even knew those names to begin with, much that they were forgotten. And I know this to be true because when I first started meeting all these studio graduates, they were living quietly in retirement. Nobody paid any attention to them, as Kevin Brownlow's book proclaims, the parade's gone by. And I know you weren't at Hollywood 80, you missed something great. This was the second International Sons of the Desert Convention, and it was the largest Hal Roach Studios alumni party there ever was. And looking back on it now, I think we did more for them than they did for us as fans. That convention showed them that they weren't forgotten. I mean, as I said, we never forgot them, but the public at large did. And we wanted to tell them that what they did really mattered to a lot of us, and we wanted to let them know it. So anyway, starting out, I wanted to connect with these people, to honor them, to thank them, to learn what they could tell me about making these films. I tried to do that in meeting, as I say, about 100 of them. I had no role in creating these films, but these other things I could do, and I have done, and for the two reasons mentioned. I have to laugh at this. Maybe I told you this before. Hal Roach used to protest after a while when I wanted to ask so many questions. He'd say to me, "Why are you interested in these old movies?" like so many, and so many of us even, we take our own life experience for granted.
Yeah.
I told him, if the deity, or maybe Clarence in It's a Wonderful Life, were to grant just one wish, it would be to be transported back in time to 1920 and to be given some important role behind the scenes at Hal Roach Studios. Now, obviously, that wasn't going to happen. So I did the next best thing, which gave me a career where I've been living happily ever after ever since. And then you and Russ come along like Stan Laurel in County Hospital and ask for a little essay on men of war.
That's right. Just a mere 2,000 words. That's all we were after.
and of course, I think what I'm doing with this work in progress, as I say, I think it's all gold because I'm writing it. But you, Patrick, and anybody listening to this, you will be the final judge on that. I know for certain that you will love the stills. I pulled some great stills to use. There's
Great.
One in particular from one of your favorite silent films, Patrick, The Finishing Touch.
Oh, yes.
Where Stan Laurel signed the still, and then he added balloon dialogue to render it as a funny, single, standalone cartoon panel. So anyway, a lot of great unpublished stills. So, okay, so now what I'm going to do, I just want to read just the draft of the first section for this book, designed to set the stage for what was going on in the year of our Lord, 1929. The title of this book first, this is what I think I want to call it: Laurel and Hardy as Men of War, just playing together.
Very nice.
So here's the way it goes. I got to get my glasses set.
Do you want me to read it to you?
Certainly.
Wait till I get my glasses. Won't take a minute.
Okay, I'm going to settle in here now. I'm going to settle in. If I fall asleep, if you're going to read me a bedtime story, because it's getting late here.
Don't fall asleep, because as I said before we went on, you're going to have to help me pronounce the name of a city in your fine country, because I've never heard it and I can't pronounce it.
Okay, I love it. Okay.
We'll see if you can. Maybe you've never heard of it either. We'll see.
Probably not the way you're going to pronounce it. No, let's go for it.
I'm not even going to try. I'm just going to spell.
Well, the man said there was no such place as squash.
All right. Never mind.
Okay, 1929 was the twilight of silent pictures, just as the medium reached its apex. The screen had found its voice, and there was no turning back. It was a pivotal year, to be sure. Charlie Chaplin was taking his time making his masterpiece, City Lights. Harold Lloyd completed the cumbersome Welcome Danger as a silent, then quickly reshot it as his first talkie, which did not help. Buster Keaton appeared in his last silent feature, the underrated Spite Marriage, before MGM ruined everything for him, the way they would for the Marx Brothers, and then for the Our Gang comedy franchise, and finally for history's best-loved comedy team, Laurel and Hardy. Long unfairly banished from the screen, Roscoe Arbuckle could only direct comedies using a pseudonym. William B. Goodrich, or Will Be Good, was the underlying promise. Otherwise, he spent much time supervising his popular Plantation Cafe just down the street from Hal Roach Studios on the same Washington Boulevard in Culver City as was Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer. Hal Roach was a fervent admirer of Arbuckle's comedy skill and twice had contracts drawn, and they exist today, hoping to bring him back to prominence in front of the cameras. But there was still fierce resistance in 1929. At the same time, Hal Roach could look out his office window and see Frank Sebastian's Cotton Club situated right across the street, where musical artists such as Louis Armstrong and Lionel Hampton performed. As Oliver N. Hardy for Norvell, the portly master of genteel pomposity and withering camera look signed a new 1929 contract with Hal Roach Studios, Inc., nowhere naming Stan Laurel. The corporate officers then were in order: Hal E. Roach, Warren Doan, H.M. Walker, Leo McCarey, C.H. Roach, Benjamin W. Shipman, and Hal's boyhood friend from Elmira, New York, Matt D. O'Brien. Will Rogers rebounded from the modest silent two-reelers he starred in for Hal Roach with the, quote, all dialogue they had to see Paris at Fox on his way to becoming the single top box office draw in motion pictures by 1932. That other great Ziegfeld stage star, W.C. Fields, had enjoyed modest success in a series of silent features for Paramount, but he returned to Broadway, appearing with Earl Carroll's Vanities into 1929, where his inimitable raspy nasal voice, muttering deathless asides with that inflated phrasing, could be properly heard. Going the other direction, Broadway headliners in 1929 who migrated to Hollywood included the unjustly forgotten Clark and McCullough, appearing in sound shorts for Fox and later for RKO. Featured were many Hal Roach Studios alumni. The four Marx Brothers lingered for a while back east and shot their screen debut in Astoria, part of the New York City borough of Queens. It was called The Coconuts, an all-talking feature film, all talking except for Harpo Marx, who resisted and remained silent like Charlie Chaplin did, but not really. In the scene where Harpo eats the telephone, it was made of chocolate. Coconuts opened at the Rialto Movie Palace in Times Square, seating 1,960 happy patrons. They saw a print that ran 40 minutes longer, or twice the running time of Men of War, than anyone has ever seen since. After only a few days, the original 35mm projection print and Vitaphone record discs were replaced with new prints and discs. Why? Don't know. Maybe audience turn was the reason. Highlight, untouched by the cutter, was the classic viaduct routine, which answered the other burning question, why a duck? There is a viaduct and lots of ducks too in Men of War, but it's just not the same. Clara Bow starred in The Wild Party, right as the worldwide wild party of the 1920s jazz age was ending with a thud. It was the year the curtain came crashing down on the Roaring Twenties, the year Variety famously declared Wall Street lays an egg as the stock market shattered and collapsed, plunging the nation into a deep depression. All wild parties were then over. Harpo's brother, Groucho Marx, reportedly lost $240,000, which equates to $4,165,572 in today's inflated dollars, owing to price level changes. That and the government printing excessive paper money. Just 5 days before, on October 24, 1929, as a favor, Hal Roach had released actress Jean Harlow from her contract. The story told was that her family and husband objected to her incipient movie career. Yet soon she would sign with future megalomaniac Howard Hughes to replace the heavily accented Greta Nissen and refilm that actress's scenes shot for the aerial spectacle Hell's Angels, which would launch Harlow's career. He had plenty else going on as well. 1929 was also the year that notables Martin Luther King, Audrey Hepburn, Grace Kelly, and Anne Frank were born. Wyatt Earp died. In 1929, Keith William Everson was born in, and here's where I need your help, Patrick. Are you there?
I'm here.
Okay, calling Patrick. I'm going to spell this, and you tell me where it is and how you say it. Y-E-O-V is in victory, I-L.
Yeovil.
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 And where is that in proximity to you?
Oh, my goodness me.
You don't know?
I don't know, to be honest. I think it might be in Somerset, so it's south from me.
Exactly. I know it's in Somerset. That's all I...
Yeah. So it's south from me, so it's probably about, I don't know, an hour and a half, 2 hours from me.
We know it's a long distance from Atlanta, Georgia. It
certainly is. It sure is.
Okay, so anyway, so in 1929, Keith William Everson was born in Yeovil, Somerset, England. He so admired William K. Howard that the young man reversed his own names, and the classic film community knows him today as the late William K. Everson, teacher, author, and mentor to many. Among other valued opinions, he thought Men of War was, quote, a tremendous improvement on Birthmarks and very funny throughout. Easily surpassing the footbridge scene in that movie's Hollenbeck Park. The San Francisco Bay Toll Bridge was opened in 1929 and became the longest overpass in the world. Baseball was then more than a sport. It was almost America's religion. Babe Ruth was its deity. Harold Lloyd Speedy was still playing in movie palaces around the world, and Babe Ruth portrayed himself in a cameo role. Whatever Babe Hardy had to say about Babe Ruth is lost to history. As of 1929 and always, according to wife Lucille Hardy, Oliver Hardy's favorite baseball team was the then lowly but lovable Brooklyn Dodgers. It was 18 years before Jackie Robinson would break the color barrier with the once daffiness Dodgers in America's then all-white pastime. Later in our relations, Stan Laurel would ask, "Who's this fella Jack Robinson?" In 1929 Los Angeles, future Dodgers great Jackie Robinson was 10 years old and a member of the merely mischievous Pepper Street Gang. At his local neighborhood movie theater, he watched and pulled for the same aged Alan Farina Hoskins in the Our Gang comedies, who was also black. There was yet no racial integration in baseball, only on screen in the interracial Our Gang troupe. The series was built around Ernie Sunshine Sammy Morrison. He too was black. Morrison remained devoted to Hal Roach and declared, when it came to black people, the man was colorblind. The aforementioned civil rights leader Martin Luther King would later say of his fellow Republican, quote, Jackie Robinson made my success possible. Without him, I would never have been able to do what I did. Oliver Hardy's widow, Lucille, told me one of his favorite films was a Fox programmer about the Dodgers called It Happened in Flatbush, as directed by Ray McCary. Older brother Leo McCary left Hal Roach Studios in that watershed year of 1929. In 1945, when McCary was the single highest paid person in America, he told a writer for Liberty magazine why he left Roach. There was a handball court on the lot, and after a game one day, McCary and the more robust Roach were sitting in a steam room. Quote, when Leo noticed Hal's powerful physique, the article read. Then McCary told his boss, Hal, a vice president has no chance for advancement when the president is as healthy as you. Later in the Cahiers de Cinema interview, McCary said, it caused me a lot of pain to leave Laurel and Hardy. But he lived at 1014 Crescent Drive in Beverly Hills, only a few blocks away from Hal Roach at 610 Beverly Drive. They vacationed together several times, planning to reunite professionally. Wherever they were, they discussed comedy. What made people laugh and why? And also, why not? Hal Roach said that sooner or later, they always got around to some imagined gag that they wanted either Laurel and Hardy or Harold Lloyd to work out on film. McCary and Roach each directed both Laurel and Hardy and Harold Lloyd. Herbert Hoover became the 31st president of the United States in 1929. His first dinner guest at the White House was the flamboyant and powerful tycoon Louis B. Mayer of Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, which handled distribution for the sparkling comedies made at Hal Roach Studios just down the street on Washington Boulevard in Culver City. In 1929, Frank Sinatra was 13, Orson Welles was 14, and women in America had only been able to vote in elections for 9 years. George Frederick Ernest Albert, or George V, was monarch of the United Kingdom. In 1929, Thimble Theater showed readers the comic strip hero Popeye the Sailor Man for the first time. According to studio publicity, the King Features spinach-loving naval character quickly became Stan Laurel's favorite, evidently displacing George Harriman's Crazy Cat, which Harriman drew right there at Hal Roach Studios in the office he shared with title writer H.M. Walker. But was there ever any inspirational connection between the seagoing sailor Popeye and Stan Laurel's nautical character who couldn't even row a rowboat in Men of War? Not one. 1929 saw solemn-faced Western star William S. Hart packed with Hal Roach to return to the screen at the latter's slapstick foundry. But Nicholas M. Schenck, the president of Lowe's, Inc., the parent company of MGM, killed the deal. With the advent of talking pictures, Westerns were deemed dead in Hollywood, if only temporarily. Metro would decline distribution on any such feature-length sagebrush Roach might produce with Hart. It didn't help that Hart had recently sued his last distributor, United Artists, especially since he won. Late in life, Stan Laurel told his then closest friend, the actor Booth Coleman, quote, "I always believed the funniest guy in pictures ever was someone who never knew it, William S. Hart." At the same time, there was no objection to Roach producing The Fighting Parson with Harry Langdon. Then on its own, MGM made 8 Westerns, 4 starring Tim McCoy, 2 starring Johnny Mac Brown, plus Tide of Empire and Way Out West. This one, starring William Haynes, with old favorites featured such as Charles Middleton, Sam Lufkin, and Eleanor Vanderveer. In 1929, Fox nearly acquired the mighty and now roaring out loud Leo the Lion's home studio, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer. The Justice Department stepped in, however, and sued Fox on the basis of antitrust violations. Quote, "Those Fox people," as Stan Laurel would later bemoan, "were not yet to get hold of and wreck Laurel and Hardy." Earlier, for the March 1 edition of the Film Daily, Hal Roach was quoted, "If Fox operates MGM, it will place us in a great position as Fox does not make comedies," end quote. Evidently, the few shorts Clark and McCullough had already made for Fox escaped Roach's attention, or maybe he did not find them funny. The major film factories like Fox, Metro, and Paramount could take advantage of their vertical integration as they control production, distribution, and exhibition of their film product. Minor independent studios like Roach, Senate, and Disney could only produce movies, had no distribution capability, and did not own theaters in 1929 or ever, at least when Walt Disney was alive. Albert Warner announced in 1929 that the rumored merger of Warner Brothers and Paramount Pictures was definitely off. And Joseph P. Kennedy's FBO and RCA combined to form the next new major studio to be called RKO for Radio Keith Orpheum, which then issued its first so-called radio picture, meaning moving pictures that talked like the radio did. Joseph P., father of future President John F. Kennedy, was next named chairman of Pathé, which was still reissuing old silent Hal Roach Studios short subjects in outlying neighborhood movie houses and throughout rural areas. Radio station KFVD, 710 AM on the dial, now Disney-owned ESPN LA sports talk radio, operated out of the, quote, Hal E. Roach Motion Picture Studios in 1929. People living in Los Angeles could listen to two shows of special interest that were broadcast every day. Hal Roach Comedy Gossip in the afternoon, and Happy-Go-Lucky Trio with Marvin Hatley both early in the morning and late at night. Were transcription discs for syndication ever made? Where out there reverberating the vast ionosphere can any of that programming somehow be recaptured? The Happy Hour program referenced in Me and My Pal was evidently carried on a different radio station. The first Academy Awards ceremony was held at the still-standing Roosevelt Hotel on Hollywood Boulevard. The festivities would last all of 15 minutes. The trade paper and show business Bible Variety covered the event and quietly reported the winners on page 7. That future snarky Laurel and Hardy fan and Golden Globes MC contrarian Ricky Gervais would likely have been amused. As of 1929, the Motion Picture Academy did not yet recognize the category of one or two reel short subjects such as Men of War for any kind of awards consideration. Soon they would, however, and the first winner would be The Music Box. The first British sound film, Alfred Hitchcock's Blackmail, was shown in London. British-born Hitchcock, Charlie Chaplin, and Cary Grant all never won Oscars. Neither did Greta Garbo nor Orson Welles. Honorary awards don't count, too late. Winning the Academy Award as Best Actor in 1929 was the huge, enormous Broadway star, forgotten today, George Arliss, for his role in Disraeli. Arliss, too, was British-born in 1868 with a special connection to Stan Laurel. Stay tuned. As of 1929, there were 23,344 motion picture theaters in the United States. Average ticket price for admission was 35 cents. That's all of 3 dimes and 1 nickel. Studios big and small issued 707 feature films that year to fill those silver screens every day. In some theaters, bills were changed on a daily basis. If you missed a 1 or 2 day run of something like Men of War, regarded as mere disposable entertainment and often not even worthy of listing on theater marquees, you might not have another chance to view that picture for the rest of your life. The top box office attractions of 1929 were MGM's Lon Chaney and Paramount's Clara Bow. Though in less than 4 years, both would have disappeared forever from movie screens. No one anywhere had air conditioning. Radio was only 9 years old, and penicillin was not yet available to treat any illness. Let some of that sink in. During 1929, Leon Trotsky was expelled from the Soviet Union and sent into exile. As far as we know, he never visited Hollenbeck Park, and too bad for him. In Chicago, 5 gangsters and 2 civilians were killed in what became known as the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. Al Capone was arrested, convicted for carrying concealed weapons, and imprisoned, but it was really for bootlegging, illegal booze peddling. In 1919, the 18th Amendment to the United States Constitution had been ratified and established prohibition, mentioned by the giddy Mr. Laurel screaming with laughter in Blotto. Prohibition would last until 1933. Yet it was true that other beverages besides demon alcohol were popular in 1929. Spoken that year, and for more than several to hear, were such immortal words as these. Now, let's see. Soda, soda, and a soda. And my dear Stan, what will you have? In real life, a different selection from among mood-altering beverages was often the answer for Stan Laurel, though not in front of motion picture cameras, unless, as in Blotto, The Devil's Brother, The Bohemian Girl, and Swiss Miss, among others, the script called for it. We know from another film, where they're mariners, any old port, that Oliver Hardy preferred instead, quote, a flagon of coffee. a line not in the script. One that is in the script uses the N-word. But again, who's this fellow, Jack Robinson? As timeless as Laurel and Hardy are, it is important to try and understand what a different world this all was in 1929. There's one Black person shown briefly in Men of War as a washwoman, is how she's mentioned in the cutting continuity. 1929 was a period of mostly unconscious prejudice. People should be judged, however, in their own time, not ours. We should not try to rule on and appraise the past by the standards of the present. It isn't fair. It isn't right. Right before Christmas, a new contract was made by Hal Roach Studios, Inc. with Stan Laurel as, quote, actor, director, writer. It was meant to replace the agreement dated November 29, 1926. There was no mention of Oliver Hardy. 1929 was only a decade removed from, quote, the war to end all wars, where 9 to 11 million so-called men of war died as fallen soldiers in that madness, that true catastrophe. All this was still very much on the minds of people everywhere. Then the Geneva Convention was agreed upon and signed in Switzerland. Buried in other news, along with notes from the clubs, were the results of some Berlin town council elections, where a new movement known as the Nazi Party happened to win a mere 13 out of 225 seats. But why even mention it? What significance was that ever going to have? Later, one of those aforementioned children born in 1929, Anne Frank, would tell us. Had she lived, of course, she would be 95 today. So much for the real world at that time. Finally, 1929 was also the year that the voices of Stan Laurel, age 39, and Oliver Hardy, who would turn 37, were first heard in motion picture theaters. What must audiences have thought? Were they surprised, pleased, disappointed? Their third all-talking two-reel comedy called Men of War was issued mid-year. A typical movie house would play 350 different shorts as program fillers during the year. Men of War would be one of them. How many of those others have left lasting marks? How many of those others can anyone even name today or on any day?
Very good point. Very good point, Richard. Keep going.
That's it.
I'm enjoying that.
That's it.
That's wonderful. Absolutely wonderful.
And the title card says in many silent Laurel and Hardy comedies, a later that evening.
Yeah, that's right. Meanwhile, back at the podcast. Fantastic. I mean, what a great sort of contextual introduction to 1929. It's just fantastic. And what I love about that, Richard, this is what I try to bring to my writing and the podcast as much as possible, is that context, because I think it's really important to acknowledge the fact that these films weren't made in a bubble. They are products of their time, exactly as you said. So that's just fantastic. Really, really great. It's amazing, isn't it, when you sort of mentioned that point about the films being made as disposable products, and it's so hard to kind of think of them in that way for us today. But as you say, if you miss that opportunity at the theatre to see Men of War or whatever film, you probably wouldn't ever see it.
It might have played for a day or two.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Buried in the middle of a theater program.
Yeah.
And what opportunity were you going to have to ever see that film again?
Yeah.
Maybe if you lived in the suburbs, maybe a year later, because it would take oftentimes a couple of years for these films to play out.
Yeah.
Maybe in a couple of years in your local neighborhood theater, by some chance you might see it again, but by then the print could be beat up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then what was your opportunity to ever see that film again? Well, you might see it when Film Classics reissued it during the war and thereafter. And if you lived into the 1950s when it was on television.
Yeah.
But otherwise, where were you going to see that again?
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. It really is a different world, isn't it, to what we're used to now. It's
is.
You mentioned just before that about.
But the films are timeless. The films are timeless, but they were completely different world. That's the point of some of this, to get people to understand what a different world it was in 1929.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, and it really paints a great picture of that. Um, when we first asked you for the 2,000 words for the magazine, for anybody who wants to read the articles that actually did turn out of that manuscript, it was volume 12, number 2. It was the second issue of our Russ and Mine magazine. We asked you for 2,000. I think you gave us 22,000 words.
I did, yes.
Of which we extracted. I think we got two. Yeah, we got two articles out of that 22,000 words. There was so much that we couldn't use, and it's from that point that we managed to talk you into keeping on going. And let's see if we can make a book out of this. Which
and there will be plenty of opportunities down the road for you to serialize, pull things out of this manuscript.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, that 22,000. I mean, that blew me away. Reading through that, there was so much information in there, so many conversations, so many first-hand accounts, so many facts, all this, golden information that you've been not hanging on to is not the right word, but you've been storing and preserving and keeping safe. And the fact that we've managed to find a way of actually, unlocking that Pandora's box is just, I'm so thrilled, and I cannot wait to read the rest of it.
Let me say that to his credit, Randy wants to share this, and everything that he learns that's new, he wants to shout it to the world.
Yeah.
And I don't have a forum like that, and that was never my agenda. As I said, I just wanted to connect with these people and learn what they could tell me.
Yeah.
And all these years later, I mean, and also you ask, well, we asked for 2,000 words. How did you get to 22,000? My answer would be to quote Stan Laurel in Men of War and say, I couldn't help it.
Do you know what you've done? What made you do it?
I couldn't help it.
I wanted to ask you, actually, just, you mentioned about the sort of, sometimes I visit this question, this time travel question, and you said, you'd like to go back to 1920 at the Hal Roach Studios. Why 1920? Just explain that. I mean, I've got a good idea, but I just like to hear you sort of, vocalize it, really.
Well, it's because that's when the Culver City studio was built. That was the start of it.
Right.
And and Harold Lloyd was making those great two-reel comedies, and the studio was really expanding quickly and coming into its own. They were on the verge of creating the R Gang comedies, and 1920s was a glorious period to be alive in this country. So, yeah. I mean, I think I told you before, my friend Hugh Hefner was born in 1926, and by the time he reached the age of reason, he realized he had just missed the best period in the history of the United States, the Jazz Age, and he lived the rest of his life looking back on that period, trying to recreate it in his own life.
Yeah.
So the 1920s would have been a great time to have been at Hal Roach Studios, because the future was very bright.
Yeah, exactly. And this is the beauty of books like this that you're creating, and hopefully the Laurel and Hardy silence book that I'm trying to write is trying to capture the spirit of that period, and to use these books as time travel vehicles. Basically, that's my aim, and I'm sure you by the sound of it, yours is doing exactly the same, which is fantastic.
And in talking to these people, they all express the same level of optimism. They couldn't wait to get there every day, and you practically had to throw them out of the place at night. I mean, Stan Laurel was a great example of that.
Yeah, of course.
And meanwhile, in giving this answer to Hal Roach, I can see him now. He just shake his head with a wry smile and say, well, let's get back to the present. Because as I said in what I wrote, I think we all take our own lives for granted.
Oh yeah.
When you meet the children of celebrities, that's just their father or their mother or whoever it is you want to focus on. They take
Yeah.
it for granted.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
we don't. We don't. We don't looking at these films.
No, no, absolutely. And, and again, I mean, I'm sure I've said it before, but I'll say it again, we're so grateful that you and Randy and, Bob Satterfield and everybody made that effort and went and found those people and recorded their thoughts and their memories, because without it, we'd had nothing to go on other than our own subjective opinions of films, I guess. So thank you for taking the time and for sharing it with us in this way and being on.
As I say, to Randy's credit, he's the one who really shares all this information that I've known all along, but I just never felt impelled to put it in a book that he would rewrite when he had new information or wanted to update it. And what I say about Bob Satterfield, he knows I've said this about him. He's done more for Hal Roach Studios alumni, both before and after they died, than anyone else. Anyone else.
Yeah. No, it's great. And I mean, I would ask you this, but I know you're not going to give me an answer to it. Let's talk about time frame, because I know as soon as listeners hear this podcast and especially that extract that you've just read out for us, they're going to want the rest, because I know I do, and I've been wanting it since we started this project back in when was it, some winter of 2022 was the issue of the magazine. And I know very well how long books take to write, and you've got your finger in so many pies, and you're such a busy man, which is what's delaying, is getting this book published. But what's your hope, Richard? Have you got a time scale in mind when you'd like to have it published?
I don't. All I can say is I try every day to clear the decks to get to projects like this. I spoke about the company that I work for, and I reported to one of the two co-founders, Hans Andresen, and he said something that resonated for me. He said, "You have to separate the important from the less important." So in other words, everything we're doing all day is important, but we have to prioritize in some kind of ordinal ranking what really matters. And this book matters. And I'm trying as best I can to clear, and as you know, writing your own book.
Yeah.
Good writing is hard. And you have to block out a certain amount of time. You can't say, well, I'll work on this for an hour now. Well, no, you can't do that. You got to clear the deck in order to really focus on researching and writing a book. So all I can say is Russ started asking for 2,000 words. I now have 100,000 words. So,
can't wait.
But I'm getting closer, but I'm not done. I'm not done.
No, I know the feeling. I know the feeling very, very well, unfortunately. But
I know that you do. I know that you do.
But it will be worth the wait. It will be worth the wait.
We're having some fun now, right?
Oh, it is fun. It's fantastic fun. I'm thoroughly enjoying the process. But I just, I'm in a way I'm kind of writing this book for myself as well as a fan. This is the book that I want to read. So I'm frustrated that I can't hold it as well, because the design work that Russ has put into it, with the the beautiful stills and the way that he presents it. I mean, you've seen his design work in the magazines. It's something that I'm sure every fan is going to adore. And we're going to put the same kind of attention to detail into your book as well, Richard. So it will, they will be things to actually treasure, even if you've read it 3 times, 4 times, and you just want to flick through the pages. It will still please you in some way, because that's how he does it, and it's just wonderful. It's a great.
Maybe you saw what Randy said on Facebook the other day. He was looking at his own book, and he was amazed. He as much as said, "How is it that I gathered all this information and put it into this massive book.
That's right. Yes, I did see that.
In other words, he can't believe that he himself did it, because when you look at it's massive. What the information that book has, so he couldn't believe it himself, and he did it.
No, I can relate to that. I really can relate to that. It's in it, and the beautiful thing is that it is there to stand the test of time, as the films did. They are there for anybody to pick up now, in many years' time. So it's I think it's slightly unfair that we're sort of dangling this carrot in front of listeners at the moment, because it isn't at the point of publication, but we are at Men of War in the podcast, and I had to mention it. So I'm really glad to be sort of, and in a year's time, people will come to this episode of the podcast and they will think, oh, hang on, there's a book, and it will be published by that time. So it was a definite thing to have to do. So thank you for coming on, and sharing that extract with us, because it truly is, it's great to listen to.
Well, it's the stage.
It does set the stage, absolutely which is really important. Yeah, really, really important. But I know for a fact from reading the first manuscript, the draft manuscript, how much more there is in that book. I mean, that scratches the surface of the context of the film, but the amount of information that I know you've got in there about the Hal Roach Studios, and as you say, the creation of that house style and which individuals were responsible for it. And so on and so on and so on is it's going to be a thing to really treasure. I can't wait. I'm excited just thinking about it again. So
and I've got you ask, well, why can't you be finished in a few weeks? But the funny thing is, in all the years that I've been meeting people and trolling the documents and being totally immersed in these films, you rush around and you get one thing and you put it away because you're on to the next thing. So all these years later, I pull out these file folders or stills, and I look at what I've written. I mean, when I would talk to these people, I'd show them stills to jog their memories, and then I'd write down on the back of the stills things that were important that they told me. And if now you showed me the front of the still and not the back, and asked me what's significant about this still, or what do you suppose you wrote on the back of this still to memorialize this interview? I couldn't tell you to save my life. I read some of this stuff. I pull out these documents and I say to myself, where did this come from? My God, when did I get this? Because you're rushing around and you get something and you put it away and it sits there and decades go by. And as we said before, the title card comes up later that evening. Well, now the evening has arrived, and I'm pulling out this stuff.
Yeah.
I just like I don't know. I wasn't even. I happened to have screened a 16 millimeter print of King Kong. So I wanted to see, what do I have in my files about this film? And I pulled out the Fay Ray folder that I have, because I met her, I knew her. And at one point I asked her, because she worked at Hal Roach Studios, what can you tell me? What was your sense of the very focus of this book? I mean, the comedy culture at Hal Roach Studios, that's in essence what I asked her. And since she was a writer, she wrote for television. She knew, and she wrote her own autobiography. She wrote me a 3-page letter summarizing her experiences at Hal Roach Studios.
Oh, fantastic. That's
if
amazing.
I had screened that print of King Kong and gone to this file and pulled that out, I didn't know it was there.
That's wonderful. What a lovely thing to have. That's incredible. That's incredible.
But I'm finding things like that all the time here. I have to live as long as Hal Roach did to even organize it all.
Well, make sure you do, for God's sake.
I'm trying.
Oh, that's great. Well, I mean, I just think it's a wonderful thing, actually, that I'm so pleased that we asked you to write that article, because, the magazine was wonderful and lots of people enjoyed it. I know they did. We had some great feedback, but the resultant book that's going to come out of it is, I'm so thrilled that these things are coming. You've actually got a vehicle to put it through, because I'm sure if we hadn't have done this and we hadn't have gone through the magazine process, you probably wouldn't be working on that book because there's too many things to do otherwise. There's too many things.
I have too much information and I have too many things to do. But
Yeah.
you said something that reminded me about how Russ asked me to do Men of War. Actually, he thought he was asking me to do Hog Wild. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do. Yeah, I do. That's right. Yeah, he's obsessed with Hog Wild. Yeah.
Is it? Well, so am I. It's my favorite Laurel and Hardy short. Absolutely. And we were going to, the two of us and Rich Carell as well, we're going to have so much fun going onto the roof of the home that was built there after they shot Hog Wild. And well, that's another long story. I won't go into it, but.
Oh, it's great. No, well, funnily enough, Russ and I were talking just today about Hog Wild, and I think we're going to go for Hog Wild for the, what would it be, summer 2025 issue of the magazine. I think we're going to focus on Hog Wild for that one. So maybe there's a slot in the magazine for that story to come out, because that would be quite fun.
Well, I said to you that I'd be happy to do the podcast when Hog Wild rolls around.
Yes, yeah.
I suppose I could write something about it for the magazine. Although I hope you would defer that because, as I say, I keep saying yes to people who pull at me to do one thing or another, and that gets me in trouble because I should be crossing off things on my schedule rather than adding things that prevent me from focusing on, as I say, separating the important from the less important.
Yes, of course. And of course, you realize now what's going to happen. Anybody who knows you, who's listened to this podcast, is going to be saying to you every time they see you, have you finished that book yet? Have you finished that book yet?
Well, the answer will be hopefully yes soon.
Yes, it will be yes soon. Oh, that's great. Richard, thank you ever so much for coming on and talking us through that today. We as soon as we have more news on the publication of the book, and I think the title is lovely. Just Playing Together is a really lovely title.
Or as Frank Terry says in Me and My Pal, more good news later as the Happy Hour program now continues.
Don't worry. Prosperity's just around the corner.
What do you mean, don't worry? Get out of here.
I understand. You want to be alone with your thoughts.
That's it. Fantastic. Richard, thanks so much. And we'll hopefully see you again very, very soon.
Thank you, Patrick. My pleasure.
And there you have it. I hope you enjoyed that chat with Richard and that your appetite for his forthcoming book, Laurel and Hardy as Men of War, Just Playing Together, is well and truly whetted. I know that people have been trying to get Richard to write a book on the Hal Roach Studios for years and years, so I'm thrilled beyond measure that we're finally going to get exactly that. If you want to stay informed about news and release information about this book, or indeed my book, Laurel and Hardy Silence, you can join our mailing list and we'll make sure you're amongst the first to hear as soon as there are any developments. Just visit my website, laurelandhardyfilms.com/books for news on all our publications, and don't forget to acquire a back issue of the summer 2022 issue of the Laurel and Hardy magazine that contains 2 large extracts all about the production of Men of War from Richard's book. Again, visit www.laurelandhardyfilms.com/winter-22, or even easier, click the links in the podcast show notes and they'll take you right there. Coming up soon in episode 37 part 2, we get into the real deep dive of Men of War with my brand new audio essay of the film, and another great guest joins me to talk about the film and everything and anything Laurel and Hardy. So thank you so much for joining me once again. Thanks to my guest, Richard W. Bann. Thanks to the Bohunks Orchestra and Basta Music. And until next time, it's goodbye from him.
Goodbye.
Goodbye from him.
Goodbye.
And a very goodbye from me. Goodbye.
Bye.